Sirens painted our porch in red and blue. My phone was still warm in my hand, and the woman who told me I couldn't live in the house I'd just bought was sitting in the back of a cruiser, staring straight ahead, like she'd just discovered gravity, yeah. That happened, and it started less than an hour after my wife and I rolled up to 1048 Maple Ridge Drive in Summit Springs with a rented truck, a box labeled First Night, and the kind of hope you get when you finally turn a key that took years to earn. My name is Evan Carter, and if you've ever thought your move-in day would be simple, coffee maker first sheets, second pizza after, well, mine opened with a human barricade in a floral blazer standing in my doorway, telling me very calmly that nobody occupies a home in Maple Ridge Estates without her approval. I remember the air was cool and clean. You could see your breath in the shade, and Lena squeezed my hand and whispered, "Did old then." The woman lifted her chin like a drawbridge and said, "I'm Brenda Halbrook, HOA president. There is a process you didn't follow. It remove your belongings and return once you've been vetted." And somewhere down the block, blinds shifted. Sprinklers ticked, and our mover, a big guy named Daryl King, froze halfway down the ramp with a chair on his shoulder, like he'd been caught sneaking furniture into a museum. I tried polite, because polite should work right. I introduced us, held out copies of the deed and our IDs, and insurance explained we closed on Friday, and the truck had a 3-hour window. Brenda didn't touch the papers. She looked at me the way a bouncer looks at a fake ID and set one manicured hand on a box of our kitchen stuff, like she was tagging it for confiscation. Maple Ridge is a standards-based community. She said approval prevents undesirable elements from lowering property values. And Lena, who is soft-spoken until she isn't, said, "We own this house, that is the process." You know what I mean. Something in me clicked right then. Not a temper thing, more like a thermostat that flips from anxious to cold. Clear. I took a breath, looked at the cluster of neighbors gathering like it was yard sale theater, and said, "Brenda, I'm calling the police." Not a shout, just a fact. I dialed 911 and told the dispatcher a person was physically blocking access to a property we legally owned, and threatening our moving crew used the words harassment and obstruction, because words matter when the person on the other end is sorting emergencies into boxes. The patrol car rolled up smooth and quiet. Brenda squared her shoulders like reinforcements had arrived for her kingdom. 2 officers stepped out, a younger guy named Officer Cole Benson, whose uniform still had the hanger crease, and a woman with that steady posture that says, "I've heard every story twice." Sergeant Dana Ruiz, and the way she took our paperwork, slow, careful reading for meaning, felt like a hand on my back saying, "Stand up straight." "I've got this." Brenda waited, then slid a stack of bylaws out of her folder and tapped a highlighted paragraph with her nail, like it was Holy Writ, Section 3. Item 7 requires pre-occupancy board approval. "They have not been approved," she said, and Ruiz read the page, flipped. It glanced up and said, "Miss Halbrook." These cover curb appeal and architectural changes. They do not give you authority to decide who lives in a purchased home. Step away and do not interfere, and that should have been the end. You could feel the street unclench a little. Daryl's crew tipped our couch through the doorway with an inch to spare. Lena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I slid the box Brenda touched deeper inside, like pushing it into the house could erase the fingerprint of the morning. And for 20 minutes, we had the sound I wanted. Cardboard tape dolly wheels, the low murmur of people doing a job. Then came the click of heels like a metronome. Wound too tight, Brenda reappeared with a measuring tape, a point-and-shoot camera. a metal ticket book that looked very official. If you didn't look too closely, and she went to work measuring the distance from truck bumper to curb to hydrant lane to lane, snapping photos of licenses, writing like a meter maid in a musical. Your commercial vehicle has exceeded the 30-minute parking limit for residential streets, she announced to our growing audience. If it isn't removed immediately, I will have it towed. And I said as evenly as I could, the street is public city. Law governs parking, not your binder, but she already had her phone out and said, a tow is en route. And I felt my patience do that odd, useful thing again, not breaking cooling. I looked at Lena. She gave me the smallest nod. Just a green light only. We see after a decade together. And I dialed 911. Again, same address, I said. Same HOA president. Who was warned 20 minutes ago, is now threatening to tow a legally parked truck from a public street. And when Sergeant Ruiz pulled up alone, this time you could feel the phones tilt a few degrees higher, the neighborhood holding its breath like a choir waiting on the downbeat. Ruiz checked everything. Not with sarcasm, with care. Tape out, measuring eyes on signage, a quick radio call to pull the municipal code. And then she turned to Brenda and said, the truck is parked legally. HOA rules do not override the city's parking code. If you continue, you will be arrested for harassment and obstruction. And that was the off-ramp. The easy one, the path back to hydrangeas and a quiet afternoon. But there's a thing about people drunk on borrowed power. They mistake attention for authority. And Brenda lifted her chin to the phones and said clear enough for the street, go ahead and arrest me if you have to. This is my neighborhood. I set the rules here. They are not welcome. I will do whatever it takes to get them out, and there. It was the twist. The mask-off line that turns a petty headache into a charge sheet. The moment when what everyone felt, but couldn't prove, came out of her mouth like a script she'd been running in her head for years. I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to win an argument. I just stood there with Lena's hand in mine and let the silence do what the law needed. The cuff snap is small, but it travels. Ruiz stepped forward and said, Ms. Halbrook, you're under arrest for harassment and obstruction. You have the right to remain silent, and Brenda took a half step back, like the sentence might rewrite the scene. You can't arrest me. I'm the president of the Maple Ridge HOA. I was protecting our standards, and Ruiz didn't raise her voice, didn't get cute. That title doesn't sit above the law, she said, turning Brenda gently and guiding her to the cruiser, while the tape measure and the camera hung useless at her sides, like props that had forgotten their lines. The block went quiet. Not triumphant, almost respectful like a theater audience. When a twist lands, Daryl tipped his chin at his guys, and the job started moving again. No applause, no victory lap, just gravity reasserting itself. And I felt my pulse drop from drum line to normal. Felt the heat leave my ears. Felt the ordinary return. In little sounds, a dolly wheel bumping a crack, a box sliding across hardwood. A laugh from Lena when I said we'd better find the mugs before the screwdriver, because that coffee machine and I were about to have words. You know what I mean. Sergeant Ruiz handed back our papers like something fragile and said, I'm sorry you had to spend your move-in like this. We don't police HOA rules. We do protect property rights. If she contacts you again about occupancy or blocks access, call us. And Officer Benson, trying not to smile, said, welcome to Summit Springs. We aren't usually this exciting. And then there was nothing left that needed to be said, because the only permission that mattered had already been granted. When we closed on Friday, the front door stood open, a buddy stood in it, and the house breathed like a place finally allowed to be a home. I'm not going to give you a montage of what came after, not going to sell you a tidy bow, or pretend I wanted a crowd to cheer. The moment that matters is the cruiser door closing with that padded thunk, and the porch still washed faintly in color. The place where her certainty ended, and our day could finally begin. Because that's the line. Your authority ends at my deed. Your binder doesn't beat the law. Your standards don't give you the right to decide who gets to exist in their own living room. And if you're wondering whether I felt sorry for her as the car pulled away, I'll be honest. I felt relieved, tired, ready to find the box with the coffee and the phone chargers and get on with living. If you were standing on that sidewalk, would you have stepped in or stayed out of it? Do HOAs protect neighborhoods or just concentrate power in the wrong hands? Where's the line between community rules and harassment, and who gets to draw it? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me if you've seen it. Go the other way, where the HOA was right and the homeowner was wrong. Bring the receipts, and if you've ever had someone tell you this is my neighborhood, like it's a badge, I want to hear how you reminded them the law doesn't wear a floral blazer.